So on today's show, we have the incredible Dan Murray Serter, serial entrepreneur, host of the UK's top business podcast, Secret Leaders, and I don't exaggerate when I say this, one of the most inspirational people I know. Over the last 10 months, Dan's become a friend, a mentor, and a fellow Peloton enthusiast. So I'm really excited to share his insight with all of our listeners today. Welcome, Dan.
Thanks, Simon. I'm pretty sure that the mentoring doesn't count on Peloton, in fairness. You're definitely steaming ahead of me there, but elsewhere, you can't have it all.
Indeed. We'll learn from each other.
Yeah.
So, Dan, I want to start off by talking about your company, Heights, which I am a user of myself. I've got it right here. Big fan of the product, and I mentioned it on my first episode. Heights has recently become the fastest company in health to raise £1 million in crowdfunding ever. So I think it was 20 minutes in the end that you managed to raise £1 million. That must feel pretty good. But as we were just talking about before the call, these things don't happen overnight. So I'd love just to go back and just start with a bit of a whistle-stop tour from you on how you got to this really great point in the business.
Yeah. So, I mean, would it be helpful to give a bit of backstory as to why even doing Heights, why that's even relevant, or are we going to cover that later?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Go
sure.
as far back as you think.
Sure. So, I mean, my journey with Heights really started from a surprising point where, I've had a variety of mental health problems in my life, because I think most people do. Not everyone obviously diagnoses them necessarily, but, my father had passed away. I had depression for a bit. It's pretty normal, very common. Starting in an industry in my previous company, Grabble, I had imposter syndrome. These are things that are very common for people, whether they get labeled or not. When my actual really diagnosable mental health problems occurred, I was really healthy, happy, and everything was good in my life, which is why it was so incredibly frustrating. An archetype man as well. Men like to fix things and label something and get to the root cause, and that was impossible for me. So there I was, at the time, very happy, finally well paid after years of entrepreneurship in my previous business, getting married, met the woman of my dreams. Well, she'd met the man of her dreams, obviously. So really very much the other way around. I spent about 10 years chasing my wife and being told no multiple times. Perfect parallels between my relationship and my business acumen.
You're a persistent
Real
man.
persistence. And my mum had just recovered from cancer. Like, all of these things were great, and I practiced gratitude. I was really happy. And then one day I just couldn't sleep. And I was like, okay, that's kind of unusual. But when I say couldn't sleep, what I mean is I went to sleep at midnight and I woke up at 2 a.m. And it's just so disturbed. I couldn't get that sleep. But more than that, I was just very wide awake. I was full of energy. I was ready to go. So I was like, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to go into the living room and just start work and see how that goes. And, then went on to the second night and the third night. And, the kind of pathetic thing about hustle culture and entrepreneurship is I told myself this story of, maybe I'm like Elon Musk. I've actually read that he only needs to sleep 2 hours a night. And, possibly this is the makings of a genius and I should lean into this. So, I'd worked from 2 a.m. to 10 a.m. when we started work, in Shoreditch. I'd already done my 8 hours of work in a day, and then I'd turn up to work, ready to work. Obviously, I'm embarrassed to say, but I was proud of myself. I thought this was really cool. That went on for about a month. Cats decided to come and join. But that went on for about a month. And after that, I started to feel really terrible. And, it would start to basically creep in with really chronic anxiety. So all day long, I'd be sweating, really badly sweating, hot and cold, really concerned about nothing, but concerned about everything. Anyway, this literally carried on for 5.5 months, and it was terrible. I tried everything. I went to the doctor, he gave me sleeping pills, but I didn't want to take them because it didn't really uncover the root of the problem. I tried all the different apps, Calm, Sleepier, I went to a sleep therapist, everything. And in the end, I went for dinner with a friend who said to me, sounds like you've got a brain nutrition problem. Have you thought about your brain nutrition? And I was like, and by the way, this was a startup founder, so she was not a doctor or anything. So I was just like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. And she was like, look, I've had mental health problems, and I went to see a dietitian, which is basically, I'd only ever heard of nutritionists, because obviously nutritionist is everyone on Instagram. But a dietitian, for clarity, nutritionists deal with healthy people, dietitians deal with sick people. So if you have a nutritional deficiency or problem in the NHS, for example, you'll go see a dietitian, they're medically trained, etc., whereas anyone can be a nutritionist. So I was like, okay, never heard of this, sounds professional and good, I'm going to go. And I went, and within 2 minutes, she basically diagnosed me very quickly and was like, sounds like you're not getting enough brain nutrition. Sounds like you're basically starving your brain of what it needs to thrive. I recommend these supplements. Take DHA omega 3, take blueberry extract because your particular symptoms are like lack of sleep, and that's an antioxidant. It will help you sleep. Or clean out your lymphatic system of your brain, is what she said specifically, but obviously didn't mean anything to me at the time. And take B vitamin complex because, I was doing a plant-based diet, and she's like, "You're going to be really low on B vitamins, not just B12, which
Yeah.
everyone tells you about. You're going to be low on all B vitamins, and you need more energy ultimately, and you need not to have an energy spike at 2 a.m. More importantly, your energy supply needs to be regulated." So skeptical because I don't take supplements, never really been into them. As in, I've just never taken them. I just wasn't. Um, I like science-based things, generally speaking, which obviously is where we get to with heights. And the problem that I'd had with supplements is like, there's a lot of effort that goes into sort of discrediting whether they work or not. And my previous experience for whether people like them or not seem to be very charismatic marketeers. And, I'm a cynical Englishman, so I love to think that I'm smarter than any smug American telling me that something worked and that they 10x'd everything. So all of these things kind of combined for me to just like completely disregard them. But I was desperate. And anyone with a mental health problem that has been in my situation, whether it's anxiety or insomnia or anything, understands the desperation to try something, anything that might work. So I went and bought them. And like literally within, a week to 10 days, I was sleeping till 5 a.m., then 6 a.m., then 7 a.m., which was a miracle for me. I was
Amazing. Yeah.
so excited to tell her. I mean, this is the thing that really, like, really impacted me. I was so excited to tell her that it worked. Like, you won't believe that this has worked. And she was so cavalier about it. She was like, I know that it worked. Sorry, the cat is having a real great time in the background trying to join in.
Yeah.
Um, but, she was like, I know it worked. As in, there's no shock, surprise. There was literally nothing from her. She was like, yes, it worked. Because that's what my job is. My job is to tell people what they probably have wrong with them. The problem is no one knows that nutrition plays such an important part of brain health and mental health, and that there is no such thing as good mental health without good brain health. So very, very, very often, if people have a mental health problem, they try and diagnose this on a psychological level. And on a psychological level, yes, of course, someone might have died, or you might be upset, you might be in a pandemic, and it might be like very anxious times and all of these things, and those are psychological problems. But actually, very commonly at the root cause, things like brain fog, concentration, low energy, poor sleep, etc., etc. These are nutritional problems too. So she was very, like I say, very casual. Not that, I mean, she's not the dietitian I work with at height. She wasn't particularly emotional or fun, but she was just like, yes, binary, yes, this worked, yes, I'm not surprised. Um, but it changed my life, right? Because of finally sleeping, feeling good, my anxiety had gone away. So I decided to do, there was two things in this. So one was that I love communication. And I think communication is an incredible superpower. And, everyone always asks me, what am I good at? And it's not really entrepreneurship generally. It's not like lots of different things, but I think I'm relatively good at communication. I'm curious and I like to ask people what they want to be communicated. So I decided to write a newsletter on what science says is good for your brain because it was good for me, right? So there's, like I said, a couple of things that go into this. The first is I I'd had a life-changing experience and it's available for everyone, right? Supplements are available for everyone, but why don't people know? Why isn't that a thing? Why doesn't anyone care? Well, firstly, I learned most supplements, and there's supplements have a bad rep, and there's a reason because most supplement companies are ripping people off. So the first experience I had was with the dietitian. I didn't even mention this. The first thing I did was buy my supplements from Holland and Barrett, and she was like, "Oh God, no, I should have told you. You can't buy them from there. They're not good enough quality. You have to go to Planet Organic or Whole Foods because that's much more high quality. Yes, they're more expensive, but actually pound for pound, they're better. But they're better value for money." And I was like, "I don't understand why." And she's like, "Because um, in supplements, for whatever reason, there is a minimum amount you can put in and make a marketing claim like supports healthy heart, healthy brain function, whatever. And then there's the amount, according to science, that actually has an impact on your health. That's a massive difference. And all the supplement companies that can get away with it will charge much less, but sell you cheap products. So if you're buying supplements for about £10, which is like I can pretty much guarantee you that they're taking the piss. If your supplements cost you about, I don't know, 30, 40 quid for a bottle, like they would at Planet Organic or Whole Foods, there's a reason. And she's like, you can see all of this information on the back of their packets. They're legally obliged to tell you this. So I bought myself 7Cs, for example, omega-3, which is the biggest brand in the world for them. The minimum amount you're supposed to have per day is 250 milligrams of omega-3s for your healthy heart, healthy brain function, etc. They put in 45 per day. So you'd need to have their product for 6 days in a row just to get 1 day's worth of what I, as a consumer, thought I'd be getting like value from. So a really interesting experience. And the first one for me was like, wow, there's an opportunity here just to not rip people off. Secondly, I was like, communication. So people don't know about this stuff, but also people don't really know about what's good for you in general, according to science. People like to listen to charismatic marketeers. People don't like to read science papers. I'm quite nerdy. I like that stuff. So I'm going to write a newsletter. I'm going to write a newsletter and send it every single week, land in people's inbox every Sunday of some science-backed tips of what you can do to take care of your brain and improve your mental performance at work this week. But all according to science. I'll reference back to the science paper. And it'll be across a range of nutrition, psychology, neuroscience, and that's it. So not really opinion, but I will be the person that's communicating it for sure. But I don't want to be like a personality. I want to be someone who's like learning about science and trying to help people understand it. And then the other sneaky thing about this, I mentioned imposter syndrome earlier. In my previous company, Grabble, which was in fashion, I had imposter syndrome because I just I wasn't really ready for the growth. I wasn't really ready for being an entrepreneur in the scene. And, there were moments that were kind of like, pinch yourself, I don't belong here kind of thing. And it really affected me. So I was like, man, I'm going to get that terribly in this business because I'm not a neuroscientist or a nutritionist. I'm going to be trying to encourage people to take care of their brain, but I don't even have that kind of expertise. So I'd read this amazing quote in neuroscience that was, if you read or watch something, you learn it once, but when you share it, you learn it twice. And that creates new neural pathways and cements the knowledge in your brain. So it's like, even if it's just for me, writing this newsletter every week, like reading a science paper and rewriting it in plain English every week is going to help me learn. And if people read it, that's great. So that was over 2 years ago, and I've never missed a beat. The next one's going tomorrow, and the one tomorrow is on the science of perfectionism. And last week was burnout. And it's
Definitely one for me to read.
Yeah, I think it is definitely one for you to read. But I had such a great time learning and reading this stuff. But that's basically the background of where the company started. The cornerstone of the business has always been and will always be this weekly newsletter because I'm very proud of it. And that's actually been the way, answer to a lot of questions that people want to know about, how we did X, Y, and Z is with a lot of patience and building a community up who trust your voice and trust that what you're doing is scientifically backed and basically designed to help people understand how to take care of themselves in short, snappy steps. So, every time I've asked for feedback on the newsletter, the only feedback that ever comes back every time is make it shorter. Like, all people want is something bite-sized all the time. Yeah. So people, will come onto habits and stuff, but, people want things easy. That's not life, but you can certainly do what you can to try and make things snappy for them. And so our newsletter is always under 3-minute read. Our podcast that we launched, Brain Care, every episode's 15 minutes. Like people are curious about, hearing stories. For example, interviews, like when I say secret leaders, that's very different. When it comes to things for me, for my health, for how I'm going to get better, it's incredible how much people just gravitate towards a quick shortcut.
Yeah. I think that's it's striking that difficult balance between simplicity for understanding versus oversimplification, and then losing the actual purpose of the message altogether, which seems to be what you guys do really well. Because certainly the trust element of it, especially hearing you speak about it so passionately, gives me the confidence to use the product because I know that you want to create something that genuinely works, and that's why I have no qualms recommending it to my own listeners, because it is it's something that I've been using it now for, I think I'm on my 2nd month now, and genuinely I've already seen an improvement in my mental health. I've never struggled with sleep, to be honest. But
Says the guy
I
waking
have
up at
been,
4:30 every day. How do you know you?
yeah, but
How do you
that's
know you're not
yeah,
just
but
struggling with sleep?
well, that's actually the reason why I can wake up at that time in the morning, I think, because I'm quite, I mean, I haven't had a professional diagnosis, but certainly going to sleep's never been an issue
Mm,
for me.
mm.
If anything, I get a bit of a nickname of Sleepy Sigh, falling asleep all over the place. But yes, it's sleep's not been an issue, but certainly anxiety and the sort of erraticness of my mental health and emotional state is something that I've been making a concerted effort to work on. And I think with my own research around the gut brain axis
Mm.
and the impact of diet and nutrition on mental health, I mean, there's amazing studies showing things like the Japanese and Mediterranean diet reduce your chance of a mental health episode by 25 to 35%, like huge impact on our mental health. So to have the nutritional insurance of a supplement that has good quality ingredients every day is something that definitely aligns with my ethos.
And this is the thing I say to people all the time, like I am a super honest guy who understands his audience as skeptics, because I was. And a supplement is a supplement. So don't buy our product and don't take our supplement if you have the time and are skilled enough to cook this stuff yourself. That will be better for you than taking heights. You don't need to. More to the
Mm.
point. For starters, like every vegan and vegetarian, and I say this as one, has to take something like heights. That is, if you don't, at some point you will suffer the consequences. And I don't want
Yeah.
people to suffer like I did. And that is where this sort of lack of surprise or anything came from with a dietitian. But if you're an omnivore, which obviously most people are, we recently did a study, a blood trial, so with vegans and with omnivores, independent, third party, etc., and learned that all the omnivores in our study, 100% of them were deficient in the key nutrients that we were measuring as well. So they were deficient in DHA omega-3, they were deficient in surprising things like B1, B3, B6, which generally speaking, and we think we're going to publish the research actually in a science journal because that specifically is very surprising. It's previously been thought that most people will generally get these things anyway in our daily diets, but actually, eating at home in a lockdown, in a pandemic, etc., people haven't really been prioritizing nutrition, and they might have been prioritizing making themselves feel good through nutrition, but not necessarily like the nutrients that are best for our bodies. Um, and
Yeah.
some of these things are really hard to cook. Like at the end of the day, like most people get their DHA omega-3s from fish. Um, but it's a catch-22 because you can't have too much oily fish. You then get mercury poison. There's all these like you can't do too much of this, you can do too much of that. So supplements, like you
Yeah.
say, are a great insurance policy to make sure that you can generally eat quite healthily for what you want to eat as well, and make sure that you're getting what your brain and body needs to make sure that you're healthy. If you are a health nerd, for example, we wrote before we ever had a product, we did a recipe every single week of brain food, which if you go on our website, yourheights.com, we've got a massive food section with so many recipes of don't buy our product, cook this instead. We like to have responsible messaging.
Yeah.
Kaz
Having a
very,
whale of a time there.
very excited to join. But yeah, it's important for us that we are responsible about what we do. Um, and I do think that, the clue is in the name with supplements, but what people really miss is this understanding of, like, oh, I don't need it, or oh, I have generally quite a healthy diet, because that was me. Like, let's just be really clear. My father died when he was young and I was young of poor health from not looking after his health. Nothing triggers you into wellness more than an early death in the family of someone you care so much about. So I can't overemphasize enough just how much that was like me. I eat well, I do this, I do that, I exercise regularly, and yet I was like completely simply diagnosable as this is the root of your problems, go take supplements. So it's
Yeah.
hard to get,
Fascinating.
yes, it's hard to get what we need. And things have possibly turned a little tide in the last week where the government has recommended 100% of people in the UK to take vitamin D supplements, which are in heights as well. The right amount is in heights. But that's been a big U-turn. because obviously previously there's been a lot of, well, do they work? Is it worth it, etc. And for them to say 100% without exception, everyone should take it because of COVID is a big change.
It's massive.
Mm,
Yeah, really, really great to see that, because vitamin D has been a big thing that I'm very passionate about as well, especially within my role as a
mm.
dentist. We see all, it's one of my main questions I ask when we're doing any sort of surgeries is, do you supplement vitamin D? Have you had a blood test? Are you vitamin D deficient? Because we
Oh, is that
know
for bone health?
the
What's that for?
it's for healing.
Yeah.
I mean, I place dental implants to replace missing teeth, and it requires the body's bone cells to grow onto this titanium screw, in essence.
Mm.
And if they have vitamin D deficiency, it's been well proven in the literature that their chance of bony healing is dramatically reduced, and their failure risk is dramatically increased. So
Mm.
it's definitely something that that we've seen in that, and yeah, certainly something. I mean, I've been supplementing vitamin D for years, which is why I was so surprised when I listened to, I think even before we'd met, I listened to you talk about vitamin D and how that actually the amount of vitamin D you need in physical form in your hand would only be a few grains of sand
Yeah.
almost, and the
Yeah.
rest of that tablet is
It's
all
chalk.
caking
Yeah, it's
agent
chalk or
and just sort of really not what someone who is trying to be healthy should be taking on a daily
no.
basis,
And
basically.
and yeah, and this is the thing about taking vitamin D, and pills in isolation as well. Is most of the time, yes, you are getting the daily dose of what you need, but you're also taking a whole bunch of stuff that you don't need because it's not a voluminous ingredient.
Yeah,
And then the other side to this as well is vitamin D. Like lots of people like to take vegetarian or vegan supplements if they can, because no point in having animal products. People don't know this, but the most common source of vitamin D is sheep's wool, which is very odd, but true. So not vegan or
yeah,
vegetarian. So, you know, sourcing high quality, sustainable ingredients that are just as impactful or more sometimes. So DHA is a really interesting one. So omega-3s, fun fact, fun nerdy fact, everyone thinks they come from fish, and that's because they're the main source of it. Actually, fish don't synthesize their own omega-3s at all biologically. So they literally get it from algae. So algae is their main food source, and that's how they have omega-3s, and that's how traditionally humans have had their omega-3s is from eating fish. So it's really interesting, like that chain. So technically
that's
speaking,
fascinating.
if you want really sustainable and the highest quality, you go to the source, and that is algae. But of course, when vegans, which do come at me quite a lot with "How dare you?" You're like basically threatening my right to exist by saying these things. I'm like, really not just saying supplement, pal. And I'm literally preaching to the converted here. Um, I just point out to people like, okay, fair enough. Well, how often have you sat down and had a lovely plate of algae for dinner then? And they're like, okay, fair enough. I'm like, this is the thing. Like, people, this is the big problem with the vegan movement is, they say, but you can get it from XYZ food source. You're like, how? No one sits around and has a dinner of algae and flaxseed. That's just not like a
Yeah,
vegan diet. Like, when the movement starts to appreciate that yes, there's good information, and 100% these things can come from vegan foods, etc. But you also have to understand what people do, what their behavior is, and how they eat. This is the thing, like that doesn't seem to connect. People don't suddenly change everything, right? One small change. People just have their habits and they try and improve their habits a little bit by a little bit, and that is the right way to create any better habit. You don't suddenly turn
absolutely.
up one day and be like, I'm going to try a vegan diet, but I want to look after my health, so therefore I'm going to eat a big horrible plate of seaweed for dinner and I'll be done. It's just like impractical.
Yeah,
People want to eat
absolutely.
tasty food.
It's marginal gains, isn't
Yeah.
it, for improvement? Um, Wicked. So you mentioned Grabble there, and one of the main things that I want to get out to my listeners from listening to this podcast is shifting their relationship with failure away from something that we should be trying to avoid through to an inevitability of life, and something that actually oftentimes we should lean into to gain the learnings from it. Grabble was also incredibly successful. I mean, you had millions of users between that and your other project, Popcorn. But what learnings have you taken from those failures that you have brought into your new business that we could all learn from potentially, and take them into our own adventures?
Yeah. So the reality is I'm very, very lucky to have had my experience of failure with Gravel. I don't regret any of it. I'm actually, like I said, very thankful for having them because there's just so much to learn. But the reality is I um, you know, things that I learned, most things I learned were about myself. So most important thing that I learned was about me as a leader. Now, previously with Grabble, I was 26 when I first started it. And I guess, like a bit of ego, definitely a bit of like lacking confidence and then sort of over egging on the confidence. I thought it would probably be very weak to admit I don't know what's going on, I don't know how to do anything, etc., etc. And so I try to lead with confidence and assurance. And, the reality is like decisions would always come back to me. And that's really like that's a real cardinal mistake for a founder or a leader. You need to hire people and empower them to make decisions without you, completely without you, and get it wrong and take risks and figure it out and explain why this went wrong or this didn't happen. But I didn't know that at the time. So, I was running marketing and every single question, every should we do this? Should we do that? This has happened, this which and like, imagine how many decisions you have to make a day. It's not practical or possible. There is no
Yeah.
supercomputer person that can possibly do that. So my greatest mistake and best lesson was I hired people who were very, very capable, but I didn't empower them properly to make their own decisions the right way, and so things always came back to me. This time round, I've hired really smart people and I've empowered them, and I never, people come to me with questions. Well, they don't, fortunately, very much, but I always say, you know the answer, you tell me. Um, and I don't try and make it's hard sometimes as well because it's also worth saying at Heights, you know, for the first year behind the scenes writing this newsletter, doing the supply chain, getting the product off the ground, we launched in January 2020 our product and we hadn't hired anyone till March. Everyone we've hired has therefore been in the pandemic and therefore we've run a remote company from day one without even intending to. Um, it's just worth saying that, you know, after sort of, I don't know, 18 months in the background of like having an idea and building it and starting something, it is actually hard to start devolving decisions to other people, right? As in, it's almost been like for fun, like we had no employees for all that time, launching the entire product into the market, website, supply chain, everything, just two of us. And that was an amazing learning experience, bloody hard work, but like super
Yeah.
great learning how to do everything ourselves. And suddenly, you're not able to do the fun bits. In fact, that's someone else's job. You've hired them to do it, so you need to step back. So sort of removing the ego from that aspect and sort of understanding that, from experience that hasn't played well for you in the past and therefore it won't play well for you again. And so don't do it again has been a great experience. And it's really stopped me from being tempted to try and answer questions or try and make decisions and disempower people that I've hired. So that's my first big learning. My second big learning was, not growth at all costs. So growth at all costs costs us the business and our sanity. So that wasn't a positive outcome at all because we pushed ourselves too hard, we grew too fast. In the end, we ended up imploding, in terms of, you know, our costs outweighed our revenue because of our customer growth, and different problems with the business model. So that became quite a big learning that you have to get your fundamentals right. And actually, to the third point, realistically, the most important lesson, and I've had this conversation with you and Rona specifically, is manage your margins before you do anything else because your margin, your profit margin on your product is exactly where you get to do things like make your customers happy. Like customers will pay a premium for a better product, and customers will pay a premium for better customer service. Like, but you have to be able to afford that. So if you're running off, which on Gravel we did 10% margins, that's
Wow.
fine. Yeah, terrible, but high growth. So, there's benefits that come with it as well. But if you do that, then the reality of your experience is, if something goes wrong, you just don't have the budget, the leeway to sort these things out for customers. And that's what happened to us. Whereas at Heights, someone loses, I mean, look, like, as you know, sending stuff in the post, people lose it or claim they lose it or DPD or Hermes or whoever, right?
Yeah.
And you've got to be able to replace that for a customer for free, without it literally feeling like it's going to cost your business like the earth. You need to be able to do that. Like one every so often packages go missing. You'll have a customer say this happened or that happened, or it's a perfect example last night, and I get this a lot, but people will talk to me about their mental health problems, etc., over Instagram. They listen to me in a podcast. They'll be like, I'm not sleeping. Someone did this last night, and I sent her a 3 month supply of heights, on us because I feel bad for her because she's taking sleeping pills. She won't come off the sleeping pills. I sent her a free subscription of Calm. It's another example. Like we have we bought a whole bunch of Calm subscriptions for people in the pandemic, for customers in the pandemic who are communicating with us because our newsletter we send every week. I always say hit reply. People do reply. And if people tell us that they're really struggling at the moment with X, Y, and Z, they're anxious, they're concerned, whatever it might be, we try and send them a free Calm subscription. No cost,
Amazing.
just like great surprise, nice thing to do for a customer that's in need. And it's all about trust. Like you hope that customers aren't ripping you off or lying, but like it doesn't ever come into our minds, right? Because people aren't like that. This is mental health, and people put themselves out there to tell you that they're struggling. So these are the kind of things you get to do as a company that really help you create not just like your value system and how you behave with people, but also a bit of legacy and great word of mouth, right? Like people will say, like this company that I randomly found on the internet, like, they just sent me a subscription that was worth more than what I paid them for their product.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing you
Yeah.
get to do if you manage your margin. So it isn't just about being like ruthless on margin, it's about the awesome things you get to do for your customers to give them a better experience.
Which also therefore feeds back to you, your own integral happiness and feeling of purpose, which is
100%.
actually the most important thing as a founder, because if you don't have a purpose and you're doing it just for the profits or the margins, I'm sure you'll burn out so much faster.
100%. And that's exactly it, really. Never, ever, ever start a business because you want to make money. Businesses aren't that great a way to make money. Side hustles might be, but not a committed business. But you should start a business because you are in it for the long haul. You're going to enjoy the ride. You're going to meet great people. You're going to turn up to work feeling fulfilled. Um, those are the things that get you through on the rubbish days. Like so many rubbish days, you can't help it. And as
Yeah.
you know, irritating though it is, like tons of time as a founder is spent on admin and legal admin and paperwork, like so much paperwork. And that is like the driest thing on earth to do, and no one else can do it for you because it's your signature and it's your thing. And there's just some rubbish things you can't outsource. And so
Yeah.
it really helps to have a sense of purpose on those days because you're like, what on earth am I doing with my time?
Yeah. One of the things that you mentioned in the first point of learnings there was that you've learned now to empower those same high performing individuals that you've hired. Is there a certain framework that you use that limits the amount of, in both ways, it limits the amount of control that you can have because you want to have more control, but it also acts as a filter for too much information coming your way so that they can make the decisions themselves? Like, is there a way in which you now set someone up, a framework that you use each time?
Do you mean like as employees?
When you employ
Yeah.
someone new, let's say in fulfillment or in customer service, do you have a framework that you can say, right, this is how we set a new employee up, which
Yes.
means that things don't get loaded on you
Yes.
unnecessarily?
Great question. And the answer to that, and it's good timing because like yesterday we did a half day on our values with our team, a values workshop. And the answer to this question all comes down to your values and how you live by your values and how you behave. So when Joel and I, the other thing that another mistake, and I'm glad you brought this up because, I didn't bring this up previously. Mistake that we made at Gravel is we didn't spend time on our values. We just were growing and we were just doing. Um, when you really like create time to create values and think about what they should impact every aspect of what you do, including your hiring. So Joel and I, before we had any product or really knew what company we were going to do, we worked with some leadership psychologists together who we still work with and basically worked on our value system and said, what are our values? We did like psychological personality tests together, saw where our overlaps were, had facilitated conversations together about what our strengths and weaknesses were, what we believe in, what we don't. And we got to three values, which are take the initiative, pursue potential with purpose, and keep a sense of humor and humility. And those three values dictated our hiring process. So then we wrote interview questions, and I'm not joking when I say we did this a whole year before we hired a single person. We had these interview questions that were
Wow.
based on the values, so that if we ever hired anyone, including as a freelancer, we'd be able to ask these questions and test that they were able to demonstrate it. So just to break it down very quickly, keep a sense of humor and humility. For us, having high ego people that think they're brilliant and love to boast and brag about how well they're doing, toxic in a culture of actually striving for success. And the problem with those people is they always think the job is done. Whereas
Yeah.
someone with, really great humility never thinks the job is done. Their best and first question is like, how can I improve what I just did for myself? Not for anyone else, but for myself. So humility is super important. But also when you turn up at work every day and it's stressful, you want to have fun. So humor, also really important. So we put those ones together and we've hired people with a great sense of humor that like to enjoy themselves, also low ego. Then pursue potential with purpose. Again, the idea here is you want self-starters, you want people with a growth mindset. And that also comes down to the other value, which is take the initiative. So that one really speaks to the problem I said earlier, right? So take the initiative for us is all about not having people that come to you with questions. You have people that their first port of call is, do I know this? No. Can I learn it on Google or YouTube without asking anyone? Yes. Because that's how an entrepreneur has to
Yeah.
learn stuff. So there's no reason why your team shouldn't learn stuff. So,
Yeah.
those three values then created our interview process. They then create our onboarding process. So we have literally like an onboarding guide, like step-by-step process where we take people through. Other cats now come to say hello. Um, they love interrupting all the different podcast sessions I do. It's hilarious. Um, Big feature of secret leaders. So,
Yeah.
so these values, and you can hear me talk about them, you understand how this sort of answers your question. These are the things that make an impact into when someone joins, how they behave, how, they behave in teams, how they behave with each other, how they behave in meetings. And we embed these all the time, and we encourage the team to do this with each other. Now, the interesting thing, like why we did this with the team yesterday, is because we were very clear. We like now have a founding team. There's 10 of us now. We've hired everyone remotely, so not everyone's met. People are in all different countries as well. Someone's in Istanbul, someone's in Rotterdam, someone's in France. So, that's been the benefit of the pandemic is we've hired the best talent, not just the best talent around London. Um, the reality is we said to people, look, like the way that you scale culture and values and live by them is you have team buy-in. So when it was just Joel and I, these were the values that we used to hire you guys. So these are like now inherent in you. Like as people, these are the things you have and the behaviors that we do in the company are based on these values, yes. But let's stress test them. Should we have different values now as a team? Are there things that we collectively believe in and talk about as a team? Because now 10 people scaling those values to what might end up being 100 people, the only way you do that is if everyone was bought into them at the time. So
Yeah.
it was really interesting, like rehashing this, and actually, you know, we're going to add a fourth value, but the reality is that the three were fairly well stress tested, and actually we agreed that take the initiative doesn't need to be a value anymore because it's just a given, right? Because and which is great because it means that we now have 10 people who just know to take the initiative, and it becomes sort of an obvious thing that you'd never hire someone without that value. Therefore, there's no need to have it as a strict value because we would just never do it as embedded in us. So we get the opportunity to think about a different value in the company.
Yeah. And what a practical thing to actually have as part of a startup,
Yeah,
because it must save so much time and unnecessary email chains around
mate, 100%.
teaching a skill.
100%. And like at the end of the day, like, the truth is that everyone thinks, and this is one of the biggest startup mistakes, full stop. Everyone thinks that values is the soft stuff. Everyone. But values is the hardest stuff. And if you do your values right, living by your values should be the hardest thing you ever do as a company. It should
Mm.
literally be the most difficult thing you do because every single decision comes back to the value and will dictate the way that someone makes decisions without asking you a single question. They can come back to the company culture and the value system and say, should I ask Dan this question or do I know the answer because of our values? And like the values that we basically landed on were humor and humility still. Trust others and be trusted because we put so much effort and emphasis into our scientific background, it felt unfair not to have trust, and we trust each other as well to make decisions, and therefore that helps us scale. So, you're an adult, go make the decision, live and die by your decisions. Uncompromising care, because again, that sort of takes the spirit of us being a brain care company in, but we care about our customers, we care about each other, we're all compassionate, really give a shit about being the most successful company we can be. And then, the pursue potential with purpose like stayed as well. So, it's like been nice to sort of merge them together by having a whole conversation and workshop on, how these turn into behaviors, habits, and help us drive change in our business.
Brilliant. And how often do you plan to do those? Have you got those structured in every year as part of the year's plan? Every 6 months, every 12 months, or is it just as see how you grow and then plan it from there?
Yeah, so values workshop stuff I think is more about every year you should sort of revisit your values. But what we do is like, in terms of like team culture, every month we do, so every week we do something called Friday Night Heights. Um, Obviously, inspired by Friday Night Lights, going to
Yeah,
film and show.
nice.
And it's just basically a team meeting. And so 3 weeks out of four, it's this is what everyone did this week. This is the data. This is the numbers. This is where we're tracking against our targets, etc., etc. And 1 week in every four, it's just a value session. So it's a 2-hour session where we do exercises and things that help us live our values. There's no professional numbers or anything. It's just workshop activities. And then every week we also do something called Central Perk, which is a virtual coffee meeting basically. It's an hour where there's no work, and in that hour, different people bring an idea of what we're going to do in that session, and it has to be something based off our values. So, for example, last week we did, virtual games that were, a bit like Cards Against Humanity, so very like dark humor,
Crude.
very crude, very funny, but like done online, and we all just played that together for like an hour. But that lives our humor value. So it just helps people be like, you're responsible for this. What do you want to do at Central Perk this week? These are our values. These are some suggestions. Let's talk about it and let's do it in that session. So it gives us like a good opportunity to sort of connect outside of work as well, but like constantly live those values.
Yeah, brilliant. Love it. Absolutely love it. So many good takeaways for me that I've been scribbling down in my notepad.
But all mistakes,
So
all mistakes that I made, right? So all things,
yeah,
all things I never knew were important.
absolutely. So I mean, you're a man who is always pushing forward and always doing new things. You obviously have a startup that we've spoken about extensively. You also find the time to do 2 podcasts. One of which, as I mentioned before, is the top business podcast in the UK,
Yep.
worldwide as well.
No, UK,
Is it
sadly, was
UK
Europe, but it becomes tough when you're competing against some people that have
against Tim
massive,
Ferriss?
yeah,
Yeah,
massive budgets, NPR, BBC, etc. But still,
yeah, but. And you find the time to write the newsletter weekly as well. So my point here is really, we touched a little bit on burnout before, but I want to be a bit more specific than that and to sort of delve into your own personal daily
hmm
routines that you find help create balance in your own life between all elements. I mean, we've spoken a lot about business and being an entrepreneur today, but that's obviously only one part of who you are as a human. So how do your daily routines create balance in your life amongst all the important sections?
yeah. So the most important thing I'd say is what I call a mental health diet. And what I mean by that is like curating the information that goes into your head is essentially the stuff that is going to define who you are. So I'm a very curious person. I've become very big into, spirituality, consciousness. I think that understanding consciousness and spirituality is arguably the single greatest hack for improving your mental well-being. That's my personal opinion. So the reality is I'm very, very grateful to have sort of discovered that path. And the reason I'm saying this is because, I read a lot of books about consciousness and spirituality, and I do that on my daily walk. So every single day, as a habit, I go for a walk for about an hour, hour and a half. Doesn't matter when I do it. I try and go in the morning, but it really also depends on what kind of night's sleep I had because I always prioritize my sleep. So, if I've had a bad night or I've got an early meeting or something like that, I won't have time to go for my walk then. But my walk is when I listen to an audiobook or a podcast on, a topic that I find interesting and I learn and I listen and I get into a creative space whilst I'm walking. And it's just a great personal time every single day, that is breaks up my day and makes sure that I get into a good, healthy habit. And also, in a pandemic, so important to make sure you're still going out in nature. So I go to Regent's Park or Primrose Hill every single day without fail. Um, and actually, I say without fail, like I had to not go 2 times this week because I was waiting for a coronavirus test back, and I didn't, obviously I had to isolate, and it was negative. But it was interesting how much that impacted my mental health, just not being able to go those days. And then
Yeah.
um, from a habit point of view, the most important thing I'd say is I prioritize my sleep. I try and get 7 to 8 hours a night. I do have two cats. They are very cuddly. They do come wake me up for cuddles, which is great, and great practice for having a kid. But the reality is it can obviously affect my sleep, and I think most importantly, also start my day with my Parlour toothpaste. Make sure that my pearly whites stay nice and white, and
Get
then
that plug in.
get the plug in, and then I one hack that I've loved, which you do as well, is Peloton. And the thing that I got wrong in my life was putting too much emphasis and pressure on myself about health and about physical exercise. Um, the reality is, like, I used to just think it's so important to have that hour in the gym, maximize that hour, etc. But the truth is, if you can do that, that is obviously the best. I'm not trying to, say, be anti common sense and science here, but the best health hacks you can ever find in life are the ones that work for you. And because I am a busy guy, because I will make excuses, because I do try and pack in a lot in my day, I've learned that if I say to myself I'm doing Peloton for 30 minutes a day, 5 times a week is my thing, I can keep to that habit. And I think this is the thing, it's about learning what habit you will keep to. I knew that if mine was 45, I've tried this. Like if I try and do 45, I end up doing it 3 times a week, not five. It's better to do 5 times 30 than it is to do 3 times 45.
Yeah.
Regularity, like for movement and exercise, is better. I found having a Peloton in my house and literally giving myself a minimum target that seems really achievable. Everyone can do 30 minutes kind of thing in my head. That's made a huge impact. So I'm really, really grateful for finally coming to terms with the fact, for example, I'm not, an obsessive on fitness. I grew up fat. I'm not naturally like, good at exercise or sport or anything like that. I think a lot of people can relate to that, right? The reason that I stay in relatively good shape rather than muscly, mate, I tried to go to the gym, I had a personal trainer for years. I never grew. Like it was ridiculous. Like whatever reason, genetically or anything, I'm just not predisposed to being like that. And it took me a lot of time and effort to understand that not everyone can get those massive muscles, feel amazing, like all of those things. I used to beat myself up about it a lot. But in the end, what I've learned is what's important for an individual is to be healthy. And your version of healthy is down to you. And that's like how you decide those things are important. And for me, you know, having a good routine where I walk every day and I'm exercising regularly enough, that is healthy by any standard, or, on the NHS, for example, that is what they would define as healthy. And it
Yeah.
keeps me healthy and it keeps me mentally healthy. And so the most important habits that I can recommend to anyone are ones that you're going to stick to. Always, 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 always. When you try and cram too much stuff in, it doesn't work. So the other habits that I'm really proud of that make a massive difference to me are at night before I go to sleep, I journal. And so I write down 3 things that went well. Um, I have a slightly extreme version with my wife. In my company, we do OKRs, which are objectives and key results. And I have marriage OKRs, marriage objectives and key results with my wife, which we worked on together, which basically sort of map out the kind of marriage we want to have, and then breaking it down into behaviors and then into daily habits. So we have literally like a weekly daily habit checklist of things like, listen, these are not every day, don't have to do them every day, but listened and supported my wife at work and vice versa, right? So did I listen to her? Did we teach each other something new? Did we meditate? I mean, there's a bunch of different ones, and like I say, they're not all every day, but it creates this really nice little habit tracker that's also a good reminder that, I'm living with someone that I care about deeply, and sometimes I can be completely engrossed in my work, too self-obsessed, etc., and not take enough time to think about my partner, how she is, and vice versa. So, it sounds really silly, but having something physical in front of you that reminds you to do these things is really helpful, because the other thing that people forget about habits, people beat themselves up so much if they commit to a habit and don't do them. But the best hack I've ever had, this is why Heights has the bottle that it has, right? The best hack in the world is put it in your environment, put it in front of you, and you won't forget this stuff. So if you
Yeah.
want to build a habit, put it in front of you. So, a really good example is when I woke up this morning, the first thing I did was say, I'm grateful for waking up today. But
Same thing I do.
I didn't, that's gratitude, first thing. But I didn't learn that habit by being, fucking Dalai Lama. I wanted to learn that habit, and so I wrote it on a piece of paper, and it's on the side of my bed, and it's the first thing I wake up. It's literally hanging over my radio, so I can't look at the time without seeing the note. And I just say to myself, I'm grateful for waking up today because I want to wake
That's
up and be
brilliant.
grateful that I have woken up. So people really misunderstand people like myself and think, oh, you're amazing at habits. You do all these things. No, I haven't. I write myself notes and I leave them in front of me in places and I make sure that I remember to do them. And that's actually the hack of making small changes, full stop, in my opinion, is you put it in your environment, you remove distractions where you can from other things, and if all else fails, write it down, shove it in your face.
Yeah, and I mean that's literally written in
You've
your
gone silent.
documentation
I
that
think your
comes
mic's
out
off,
with
Sam.
heights. So
I can't. Oh, maybe it's my headphones. Have my headphones just disconnected? Sorry.
I think we're okay at my end.
Interesting. Sorry, say something?
Can you hear me now?
Can't hear you. That's so weird. Can I hear you here? Say something?
Can you
Oh,
hear me
I can
now?
hear you now. Oh, it turns out one of my headphones just went. Sorry, you're gonna have to edit that crap out.
So yeah, I would say your that's actually written in your documentation that comes out with heights, and so my heights now sits next to my pre-workout that I have before I get on my Peloton. So I know every morning when I come down before I exercise, I'm going to get those 2 heights in me, and that's the main issue I've had with supplementation in the past is I'll just forget to take them,
Yeah.
and then once you lose that routine that you're in, it's very, very difficult to get back into it. And then it just becomes, you lose all the benefits. A lot of these hacks in inverted commas require persistence, just like regular exercise, just like regular meditation. You get the real benefits when you start building them into your day to day, I find.
100%. 100%. And never, never overemphasize just putting stuff in front of you and writing it down in front of you. Post-its work fine.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that one. I really, really do enjoy that. Right, so I want to finish with the question that we ask to every guest on the podcast, which is, what's the one small change that you've made that you wish you'd made earlier in life?
Yeah, and it's a great question. I think the answer is annoyingly, because I'm sure lots of people will say this, but probably meditation, because it took me about 5 years of saying I'm going to meditate every day to actually get into the habit of doing it. And again, the way that I ended up getting into the habit of it was doing it right before I went to sleep. So 10 minutes on Calm right before I went to sleep. Sometimes I fell asleep, but I didn't beat myself up out over it because at least I was trying. Um, 2 years of doing it every single night, which I have achieved now. Maybe I've missed a day like here or there, but I didn't beat myself up out over that either. But like generally 2 years of doing it every day. Um, this year, January 1st, is like I'm going to up my game to 20 minutes. So whether that's split into 2 sessions of 10 minutes or one of 20 doesn't matter to me. But that's really important to me because like a lot of entrepreneurs, but a lot of people, like I get distracted very easily. My mind is awful. Like I've got 100 ideas running around all the time and they're distracting me nonstop, and finding focus is so hard. So I think the way that I need to improve the most is by having some clarity, focus, and just attention to the single task that I'm doing. And that is the thing that meditation has helped me do. But also, like I mentioned earlier, I'm really interested in consciousness. So the idea of like calming your thoughts, which aren't you, and coming back to yourself, which is like the silent and present version of you, is just an amazing habit that I'm really looking forward to taking further in my life. So that's the one that I'm currently working on, and the one that I think has had a big impact on my mental health. And I'm really excited for where it can help take my sense of self and sense of inner peace, as well as focus and productivity.
Yeah, it really does. It just hits all of the different elements of life, doesn't it? And I think I completely agree with you. It's that excitement actually of how far can I take these feelings that I get when I'm meditating, and where does it end up,
Yeah.
and how introspective can you become? Because for sure, looking to the future, looking to the past are two things that I'm very, very guilty of.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the one time in the day that I actually look to the present as much as I can do, even though I'm sure I'm the same as you. When I start to meditate, that's the time when I get all my great ideas about things.
Right, and you want to write them down and stuff. So yeah, it's hard, but it's a great skill to learn. So yeah, that's definitely my one.
Brilliant. Dan, I could speak to you for another hour, so I think we're probably going to have to get you back on the podcast at some point to dive deeper into your thoughts around consciousness and spirituality, because I
I'd
think we
love
could
to.
probably do a whole hour on that. And certainly your discussions that I've heard you talk about previously around a focus on the universe and where we fit in as individuals within the universe has changed my mindset around spirituality and death, certainly. So that's a topic for another day. But for now, I'll bid you adieu, and thanks for coming on the podcast, and see you again soon.
Thanks so much, mate.
Cheers. Bye.
Awesome, dude. So I've got to jump.